I've been using Photoshop for a while now, and this is the advice I'd give to my younger self if I could start learning it all over again. The first thing the complete beginner needs to work out is how to remove a subject from its background. There are many ways that you can do this, and if you explore your options, you'll probably notice that some work faster than others. One of these options is the pen tool, and when you're just starting out, it'll seem like the most time-consuming and labor-intensive masking tool out there. But I still wish to this day that I started using the pen tool a lot earlier. Long story short, because the pen tool is so time and labor-intensive, it gives you really great control over your selections. This not only means that you'll save time in the long run when masking more complicated objects, but that you'll have a solid foundation for creating paths and shapes later on. As you learn how to use the pen tool, you'll then want to combine that skill with the Refine Selection tool. And basically, what the Refine Selection tool does is bring back the detail in things like hair and fur that you would have otherwise lost if you only used a basic mask. A fun project you could try at this stage to hone in your masking skills is to design your ideal living room in Photoshop. Start with an image of an empty room and then add all sorts of furniture and decorations to liven up the place. As you start placing more and more objects in, you'll probably start to notice that the perspective seems off for some objects. That's where you'll want to familiarize yourself with the composition and positioning options of the transform tool. Using options like perspective, skew and warp, you can start adding a dimension of realism to your compositions. So now that we're familiar with the bare bones of Photoshop, the question you need to ask yourself is, what do you want to do with it? Because Photoshop's such a vast program, you don't actually need to know what every single tool does. Instead, focus on the 20% of the tools you'll be using 80% of the time. Depending on your past experience with photography, you'll probably be drawn to either healing and touching up photos or composite images and poster design. If you're going to approach Photoshop from a photography perspective, you're going to want to start experimenting with tools like the Spot Healing Brush and the Clone Stamp tool, and learn about things like how to remove red eye and grain, because these will be key parts of your main toolkit. In this example here, both the Clone Stamp tool or the Spot Healing Brush could be used to remove the objects on the horizon. So if we're using the Clone Stamp tool, we can just select another point on the horizon and paint over the unwanted object. For the Spot Healing Brush, I recommend just painting away little bits at a time, rather than trying to remove the whole object at once, because sometimes that can create strange results. You'll also want to check out the Camera Raw Filter tool, which is essentially Photoshop's version of Adobe Lightroom. The Camera Raw Filter allows you to dramatically change your photographs by changing the contrast values, color values, and saturation of the image, and can really bring photographs to life. I'll go so far as to say that the Camera Raw Filter is one of the big quick wins you'll get in your Photoshop journey, so it's definitely worth checking it out early on. We can already see a big before and after taking place here. For the people interested in Photoshop, for the purpose of creating poster designs and composite images, there are two main aspects of Photoshop you should familiarize yourself with. If you're going to be working with text, you'll want to check out the options inside the effects settings to make it pop or become 3D. You can also do a whole range of things like add glow or stroke around text, and use the bevels and emboss settings to make it look 3D. If you want to make composites, you'll need to be able to adjust the colors and lighting of each layer so that everything looks in place. And to make these adjustments, you'll want to familiarize yourself with the fill and adjustment layer settings. There are quite a few of them, but just cycle through them and mess with the sliders until you know what each one does. Once you learn what each adjustment layer does, you can then use brushes to apply the adjustments only to certain areas of a layer, letting us create things like highlights and shadows. You'll also want to learn the camera raw filter, just like the photographers. Whichever road you choose, you'll eventually learn that lighting is everything. And by being more intentional with it, you'll be able to create better works of art. Even though it takes a while to learn about lighting, by properly understanding it, you'll get way more out of the tools in the long run. So that's my rough framework to help beginners rapidly gain experience in their Photoshop journey. Now it's time for you to go out there and create.